I stood at the back of that conservatory, watching my baby sister glow in her wedding dress, and I should have felt proud. I was proud. But when Edward Kingsley rose with that champagne flute, wearing that smile like armor, I felt my mother's hand in mine again, the one I held as smoke filled our lungs 17 years ago. "To new beginnings," he said, voice smooth as marble, "and the kind of order some people were never meant to keep." The room laughed. June didn't. She knew that tone. I thought about the envelope in my purse. The one with his signature approving a cost cut that killed 43 people. The one timed to detonate in exactly 4 minutes. My phone buzzed. The reporters were ready. I stood up. And that's where my story truly began. Before I share this chapter of my life, please, if you're listening to this right now, help me prove my mom wrong. She said no one cares about stories anymore. But I believe stories still matter. They heal us, they teach us, and sometimes they save us. Subscribe to Queen's Voice, and let's keep breathing life into tales that refuse to die. Now let's begin. I was 17 when I learned that some people's lives are considered acceptable losses. My mother, Mara Bennett, died on a Tuesday. The factory fire started at 4:47 a.m., according to the official report. She wasn't supposed to be there that early. She'd gone back because Mrs. Chun, one of the seamstresses, had left her insulin in her locker. Mom had the master key. She always helped people. That's who she was. The building was owned by Kingsley Properties. You've probably seen their logo, that elegant silver K, on half the high-rises downtown. They build hotels, luxury apartments, mixed-use developments. They sponsor galas and scholarship funds. Edward Kingsley himself cut ribbons at hospital wings. The factory was in their secondary portfolio. Garment manufacturing. Low margin. Forgettable. 43 people died that morning. The official cause: faulty wiring. The official response: a settlement offer, a sealed report, and a press release about tragic accidents and improved safety standards moving forward. I remember standing in the ash 3 days later, watching a city inspector walk through the rubble. He spent 11 minutes inside. 11. Then he stamped a form and left. My father had died when I was 12, heart attack, sudden and cruel. So when Mom died, it was just me and June. She was 7 years old, gap-toothed and afraid of the dark. She kept asking when Mommy was coming home, and I kept lying until I couldn't anymore. We had an aunt in Nevada who offered to take June. "You're too young for this," she said, not unkindly. "Let me raise her. You go to college. Live your life." But June's hand was so small in mine. And she only fell asleep when I sang the song Mom used to sing. The one about the sparrow who learned to fly in the rain. I said no. I need you to understand something. I wasn't heroic. I was terrified. I was 17, working doubles at a diner, taking my GED classes at night, and learning to forge my aunt's signature on school permission slips because I couldn't legally be June's guardian. But I couldn't let her go. She was all I had left of the before times, before the smoke, before the silence. The settlement money helped. $60,000 for a life. They made us sign an NDA. I was young enough, desperate enough that I signed. I told myself it was practical. Survival. But I never forgot the way that inspector rushed through the ash. Or the way the Kingsley lawyer smiled when I put pen to paper, like I was doing him a favor. I started studying fire safety because I needed to understand what had killed my mother. I took community college classes while June was at school. I learned about fire loads and egress routes, about electrical systems and suppression equipment. I learned that buildings don't just burn, they're allowed to burn. Every fire is a story of choices someone made. Cheaper materials, delayed inspections, blocked exits, ignored violations. I got my certification at 22. By 25, I was working as a junior fire safety engineer for a mid-sized firm. I wasn't supposed to have access to historical records, but I knew people. I traded favors. I spent my lunch breaks in the city archives, pulling permits and inspection logs. And I started to see the pattern. Kingsley Properties had a shadow. Wherever they built, there were gaps, missing inspection reports, rezoning approvals that sailed through when they should have been challenged, contractors who cut corners and somehow never faced consequences. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But it was there like rot behind drywall. I found the name of the inspector who'd cleared the factory: Gerald Price. He'd retired 6 months after the fire with a generous pension. He now lived in a gated community in Scottsdale and drove a Mercedes. I found the subcontractor who'd handled the electrical work, Barton and Sons. They'd dissolved 2 weeks after the fire. The owner, Marcus Barton, had started a new company under his wife's name. Same crew, same shortcuts. I found a zoning memo, deep in a digital archive, that showed the factory had been flagged for electrical violations 8 months before the fire. The follow-up inspection was marked completed and signed by Price. But I pulled the contractor's schedule from a separate database. No one had been dispatched that day. The inspection never happened. Someone just signed the paperwork. I kept digging. Nights, weekends, every spare moment. I became the kind of person who sees evidence in everything. A slightly altered invoice number. A deleted email recovered from a backup server. A signature that doesn't quite match the others. June thought I was obsessed. She wasn't wrong. "Mara, you're going to make yourself sick," she'd say, finding me at 2 a.m. with blueprints spread across the kitchen table. "I'm fine," I'd lie. "You're not sleeping." "I sleep." "You dream about fires." I did. I dreamed about my mother's hand slipping from mine. I dreamed about Mrs. Chun calling for help in a language I didn't speak. I dreamed about 43 people who went to work and never came home. But I also dreamed about standing in front of Edward Kingsley and showing him exactly what I'd found. That dream kept me going. June grew up beautiful. Not just physically, though she had Mom's eyes and smile, but in spirit. She was kind without being naive, strong without being hard. She studied social work at the State University. She volunteered at shelters. She believed in people. I'd raised her to believe in people. I didn't want my anger to become her inheritance. She met Oliver Kingsley at a charity fundraiser when she was 23. She was there as a volunteer. He was there because his father's company was the sponsor. When she first mentioned him, I felt something cold slide down my spine. "Kingsley," I said too sharply. "Yeah, Oliver Kingsley. He's really different from what you'd expect. He doesn't even work for his dad's company. He teaches architecture at the community college." "He teaches?" "Yeah, and he volunteers with Habitat for Humanity." "Mara, he's not like them." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. I met Oliver 3 weeks later. June brought him to Sunday dinner, nervous and glowing. He was 30, soft-spoken, with kind eyes and calloused hands from building homes on weekends. He asked about my work. He listened when I talked about fire safety regulations. He didn't perform interest. He was genuinely curious. "My father's company. They don't always get it right," he said quietly toward the end of the evening. "I've tried to talk to him about better practices. He thinks I'm naive." I watched him carefully, looking for the lie. The performance. I didn't find it. But I also knew that good people can come from bad systems. And sometimes they're the best cover those systems have. They dated for 2 years. Oliver was patient, thoughtful. He brought June flowers for no reason. He remembered my birthday. He showed up when I needed help moving furniture or fixing the leaking sink I'd been ignoring. June was happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy. And I was conflicted. Because I was still digging. Still collecting evidence. And the deeper I went, the uglier it got. I'd connected with a former Kingsley accountant named Mateo Rivera. He'd left the company 5 years ago after seeing discrepancies he couldn't explain. Payments to shell companies, invoices that didn't match delivery records, payroll for ghost employees. He tried to report it internally. He'd been told to focus on his assigned accounts. He quit a month later. I couldn't prove anything. He told me over coffee at a diner far from downtown. But I kept copies. Just in case. Those copies were a treasure map. Coded transactions, routing numbers, contractor payments that disappeared into offshore accounts. Mateo and I spent months piecing it together, building a financial timeline of Kingsley Properties' systematic cost-cutting measures. Then I met Anika Desai. She was an investigative reporter for the city's independent paper. The kind of journalist who'd broken stories about police corruption and environmental violations. She was relentless and principled, and she'd been trying to crack the Kingsley empire for 3 years. "They're too clean," she said when we first met. "That's how I know they're dirty. Nobody builds that much, that fast, that profitably without breaking something. I showed her what I had. The inspection reports. The contractor records. Mateo's financial documents. Her eyes went wide. Mara, this is enough to start a federal investigation. I need more, I said. I need the direct connection. I need proof that the orders came from the top. That's going to be nearly impossible. Men like Edward Kingsley don't put their names on anything. Then we find the thing he didn't think to hide. It came from an anonymous email. I don't know who sent it. To this day I don't know. But someone somewhere inside Kingsley Properties wanted the truth out. The email arrived on a Tuesday, 17 years to the day after my mother died. The subject line was just a date. April 9, 08. The morning of the fire. The attachment was a compressed file. Encrypted. Took Mateo 2 days to crack it. Inside was a recording of an executive conference call from the night before the fire. 6 voices. I didn't recognize most of them, but I recognized one. Edward Kingsley. The factory retrofit is over budget, someone said. We're looking at another $120,000 to bring the electrical up to code. We're already 3 months behind schedule, another voice added. Then Edward. What's the fine if we're caught operating without compliance? 15 to 30,000 typically. Maybe 50 if someone makes noise. A pause. Then Edward again, measured and calm. So we're spending $120,000 to avoid a possible $50,000 fine? Well, it's also a safety. Let's delay the retrofit. We'll address it in next quarter's capex. Get the factory operational now. We've got orders to fill. There was silence on the call. Then someone said, Understood. The fire started 11 hours later. I listened to that recording 40 times. I heard the casual arithmetic of it, the cost-benefit analysis that treated human lives as acceptable risks. June was getting married in 3 months. Oliver had proposed at Christmas on one knee in the snow, and she'd cried and said yes. I was happy for her. But I was also holding a recording that proved Oliver's father had essentially ordered the fire that killed our mother. What do you do with that? Do you tell your sister that the man she loves, the good, kind man who volunteers and teaches and builds homes, is the son of a man who let 43 people die to save $70,000? Do you destroy her happiness to serve your truth? I didn't sleep for weeks. I wrote letters to June that I never sent. I tried to explain, tried to make her understand why I had to do this. Why I couldn't let it go. If I stay silent, I wrote, then Mom died for nothing. Then all of them died for nothing. And the next time Edward Kingsley decides that safety is too expensive, more people will die. And that will be on me. But I also wrote, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Anika and Mateo helped me build the case. We coordinated with federal investigators quietly, feeding them documents through back channels. We prepared a media package, emails, financial records, the audio recording, expert analysis from engineers and forensic accountants. We timed it carefully. It had to be airtight. It had to be undeniable. And it had to be public because men like Edward Kingsley make things disappear behind closed doors. The wedding was set for June 15th at the Ashford Conservatory, a beautiful glass-walled venue that overlooked the river. 200 guests. A string quartet. June had chosen blush roses and soft gold lighting. She'd asked me to walk her down the aisle. I said yes, even though I knew what I was about to do. The plan was simple. The moment Edward Kingsley stood to give his toast, the moment he claimed the spotlight, the story would break. Every major outlet simultaneously. Press releases. The recording. Federal investigators ready to move. I'd timed it so June would know the truth before she was legally bound to that family. So she'd have a choice. But I also knew she'd hate me for it. The night before the wedding, I almost called it off. June was at my apartment laughing over takeout, trying on her veil for the 100th time. She looked so much like Mom it hurt. Thank you, she said suddenly. For what? For everything. For raising me. For being there. For making this possible. Her eyes filled. I know it wasn't easy. I know you gave up a lot. I couldn't speak. She hugged me and I held on too tight. I love you, I whispered. I love you too. And I thought tomorrow she might never say that again. But I also thought, Mom would want the truth. So I didn't call it off. I let the clock run. The morning of June 15th was perfect in that dangerous way. The kind of beauty that feels like an omen. I woke at 5, couldn't go back to sleep. I made coffee and sat by the window watching the city wake up. Somewhere across town, Edward Kingsley was probably doing the same thing, probably thinking about his toast, probably pleased with himself for raising a son who'd married well, a girl from nothing who'd grown up pretty and grateful. He didn't know yet that his world was going to end in 9 hours. My phone buzzed. Anika. Federal agents confirmed. They'll move as soon as the story drops. You sure about the timing? I typed back. 1:30 p.m. Not a minute sooner. Mara, are you ready for this? I wasn't. But I typed yes. Another message, this time from Mateo. All outlets confirmed receipt. Embargo lifts at 1:30. No going back now. No going back. I sat there holding my phone and let myself imagine an alternate version of today. One where I stayed quiet. Where I let June marry into the Kingsley family. Where I smiled through the toast and kept my evidence locked away. Where I chose her happiness over justice. It would have been easier. But my mother's face kept appearing in my mind. Not the way she looked in the fire, I never let myself picture that. But the way she looked when she tucked June into bed, singing that song about the sparrow. The way she looked when she left that morning, kissing my forehead, saying she'd be home by breakfast. She'd made a choice that morning. She'd gone back for someone who needed help. Now I had to make mine. I arrived at the Ashford Conservatory at 11. The place was already humming with preparation. Florists arranging centerpieces, caterers setting up the reception hall, a sound technician testing microphones. The conservatory was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, white silk draping from the exposed beams, tables set with crystal and gold-rimmed china. It should have been in a magazine. It probably would be, though not for the reasons June had hoped. I found her in the bridal suite, surrounded by bridesmaids and makeup artists, and the kind of controlled chaos that happens before big moments. She was in her robe, hair half done, laughing at something her friend Rachel had said. When she saw me, her whole face lit up. "You're here." "Of course I'm here." She crossed the room and hugged me, and I held on, memorizing it. The smell of her perfume, the sound of her laugh, the way she felt safe in my arms, the way she had since she was 7 years old. "Are you crying?" she asked, pulling back. "No. Maybe. It's just you're getting married. Don't you start or I'll start, and then my makeup artist will murder us both." I laughed, but it came out wrong. Broken. June's smile faltered. "Hey, you okay?" "I'm fine. Just emotional." "Mara." She took my hands. "I know this is weird. The Kingsley thing. I know you've never totally trusted it. But Oliver's not his father. You know that, right?" I did know that. Oliver was good. That was the tragedy of it. He was genuinely, completely good. And I was about to blow up his family anyway. "I know," I said. "And you'll be okay? Today? No fire inspector lectures during the ceremony." She was teasing, trying to lighten the mood. "I promise. No lectures." She kissed my cheek. "Thank you. For everything." "I mean it." I nodded, not trusting my voice. As I left the bridal suite, I passed a mirror and saw my own reflection. A woman in a charcoal dress, hair pulled back, eyes hollow. I looked like someone going to a funeral. In a way I was. The ceremony was at noon. I walked June down the aisle, and every step felt like carrying something fragile toward a cliff. She was radiant in her dress, vintage lace and delicate beading, holding a bouquet of blush roses. The guests stood. The string quartet played. Sunlight poured through the glass ceiling. Oliver waited at the altar, and when he saw June, he started crying. Not subtle tears, full, unashamed sobbing. His best man handed him a tissue. People laughed softly, warmly. June was crying too. I placed her hand in Oliver's, and he looked at me with such gratitude, such genuine respect, that I almost couldn't bear it. "Thank you," he mouthed. I stepped back and took my seat in the front row, next to June's maid of honor. The officiant began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." I checked my phone under the edge of my clutch. 12:14 p.m. 1 hour and 16 minutes. I watched June and Oliver exchange vows. I watched them promise to love each other through everything, to be honest and kind and true. I watched Oliver's father in the front row across the aisle, looking proud and magnanimous in his expensive suit. Edward Kingsley, 72 years old. Silver hair, sharp jaw, the kind of face that belonged on currency. He'd built an empire. He'd donated millions to charity. He'd never spent a single night in jail. In 76 minutes, that would change. Have you ever sat through something beautiful while carrying something terrible? It's like watching a movie when you already know the ending. Every smile feels like a countdown. The officiant said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Oliver kissed June, and the room erupted in applause. They walked back down the aisle together, glowing, and June caught my eye and grinned, and I smiled back even though my heart was breaking. 12:31 p.m. 59 minutes. The reception hall was set up like a dream. Round tables with cascading centerpieces, a live jazz band, champagne towers catching the light. The head table faced the room, June and Oliver in the center, flanked by bridesmaids and groomsmen. Edward Kingsley sat 2 seats down from Oliver, next to Oliver's mother, Margaret. I was seated at a table near the back. Deliberately. I didn't want to be close when it happened. Matteo was there 2-3 tables away, pretending to be someone's plus one. Anika was outside, coordinating with the press crews who'd been told to arrive at 1:25 p.m. for a breaking story. Everything was in place. The first course was served. People ate and talked and laughed. The jazz band played something soft and elegant. June kept looking over at me, smiling, making sure I was okay. I smiled back every time. At 1:15 the band finished a song. The MC, Oliver's college friend, took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to hear from the father of the groom. Please welcome Edward Kingsley." Applause. Edward stood, straightening his tie, soaking in the attention. He picked up his champagne flute and waited for the room to settle. 1:17 p.m. 13 minutes. My phone was in my lap. I'd silenced it, but I could feel it there, warm and waiting. Outside, Anika would be getting ready. Federal agents were in position. The outlets had the story queued. All I had to do was wait. Edward began. "Thank you all for being here on this joyous occasion. Margaret and I are thrilled to welcome June into our family." Polite applause. June smiled, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew her history with the Kingsleys was complicated. She knew Edward barely acknowledged her at family dinners. "Oliver has always had a good heart," Edward continued. "Sometimes too good. He sees potential where others see projects." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter. June's smile tightened. "But that's what makes him special. He believes in building things, in creating order out of chaos." Edward looked directly at me then, just for a second, but it was enough. "Some people are builders," he said. "And some people, well, they're better suited to watching from the sidelines, to maintaining what others create." My chest tightened. "June, we're happy you found your way to our family. And Mara," he raised his glass toward me, "we appreciate your dedication. A fire inspector. How quaint." The word landed like a slap. A few people chuckled nervously. Most didn't. They could feel the edge in his voice. June looked horrified. Oliver touched her hand, whispering something. Edward continued. "To new beginnings. And to the kind of order some people were never meant to keep." He smiled. That practiced, perfect smile. The room lifted their glasses. And I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping back cut through the moment. Heads turned. Edward's smile froze. June's eyes went wide. "Mara." I didn't look at her. I looked at Edward. "I'm sorry," I said, voice steady. "I have something to say." "This isn't the time," Edward started. "Oh, I think it's exactly the time." I walked toward the head table. People whispered. The jazz band had stopped playing. The entire room was watching. Oliver stood up, confused. "Mara, what's going on?" "Sit down," Edward said, voice hard now. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I reached the head table. "Do you even know who I am, Mr. Kingsley?" He laughed. Short and sharp. "Of course I do. You're June's sister. The girl who raised her after that unfortunate accident." "Accident," I repeated. Interesting word choice. "Mara," June said, standing now. "Please. What are you doing?" I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. My mother died in a fire 17 years ago, I said to the room. A factory fire. One of 43 people who died that morning. The building was owned by Kingsley Properties. Edward's face went pale then red. This is completely inappropriate. The official cause was faulty wiring, I continued. But that was a lie. The building had been flagged for electrical violations. The retrofit was delayed because it was too expensive. Someone decided that $120,000 was too much to spend on safety. Security, Edward barked. Remove her. But no one moved. The room was frozen. Oliver was staring at his father. Dad, what is she talking about? She's clearly disturbed. I have a recording, I said, of an executive call. From the night before the fire. Edward's mouth opened. Nothing came out. My phone buzzed in my hand. 1:28 p.m. 2 minutes early but close enough. The story breaks in 2 minutes, I said quietly, looking directly at Edward. Every outlet. The recording. Financial records. Federal investigators are already moving. Margaret gasped. Oliver grabbed the edge of the table like he might fall. June was staring at me, tears streaming down her face. You knew? This whole time. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. You ruined my wedding. I ruined it? June, these people killed our mother. Edward lunged forward but Oliver caught him. Dad, tell me she's lying. She's twisting things. The recording is time-stamped, I said. April 8, 2008. 10 p.m. You approved delaying the electrical retrofit to save money. 11 hours later, the building burned. My phone lit up. Headlines cascading across the screen. Kingsley Properties under federal investigation. Audio recording links CEO to factory fire. 43 deaths. New evidence emerges. The room's phone started buzzing too. A chain reaction. People pulling out devices, reading, gasping. Someone near the bar said, "Oh my God." A woman at the table next to me started crying. Oliver looked at the screen of his own phone, then at his father. Is this real? Edward said nothing. Dad, is this real? Oliver, you don't understand how business. Oliver's face crumpled. He turned away, one hand over his mouth. June collapsed into her chair, sobbing. And I stood there, in the middle of the conservatory, surrounded by shattered glass and champagne, and 200 people learning that the ground beneath them wasn't solid after all. Outside I could hear sirens. The federal agents arrived at 1:43 p.m. They were quiet about it. No dramatic entrance, just two men in suits who spoke briefly with Edward and then escorted him toward the exit. Margaret followed, crying. Oliver stood frozen at the head table, staring at nothing. The guests began to leave. Slowly at first, then in a rush. No one knew what to do. Stay? Go? Pretend this was normal? June sat alone at the head table, still in her wedding dress, mascara streaking her face. I approached slowly. June. She looked up, and the hatred in her eyes nearly knocked me over. Don't. Please let me explain. You knew. For how long? A year. Maybe more. A year. She laughed, bitter and broken. You knew for a year and you didn't tell me. I wanted to tell you. You let me plan a wedding. You walked me down the aisle. You smiled at me. Her voice cracked. How could you? Because I love you. Because I wanted you to have a choice. A choice? You think this is a choice? You destroyed everything. June, he killed our mother. I know, she screamed. I know. But you didn't do this for Mom. You did this for you. Because you couldn't let it go. Because your grief mattered more than my happiness. The words hit like bullets. That's not fair, I whispered. Fair? You want to talk about fair? She stood up, shaking. You've been obsessed with this since I was 7 years old. Every decision, every sacrifice, you made me think it was about raising me. But it was about this. About revenge. It was about justice. It's the same thing. And you knew it would destroy my wedding. You knew it would destroy Oliver. But you did it anyway. Rachel, the maid of honor, appeared and gently took June's arm. Come on. Let's get you out of here. June let herself be led away. She didn't look back. I stood alone in the conservatory, surrounded by abandoned champagne glasses and wilting roses and the ruins of what should have been the happiest day of my sister's life. Anika found me there 20 minutes later. "It's done," she said softly. "The story's everywhere. The feds have Edward in custody. 3 other executives are being brought in for questioning." "Good. Mara, are you okay?" I laughed and it came out like a sob. No, I'm not okay." She put a hand on my shoulder. "She'll understand. Eventually. Will she?" Anika didn't answer. The media frenzy lasted 3 weeks. Constant coverage. Every outlet running the story, dissecting the audio recording, interviewing families of the victims, analyzing the financial documents. Edward Kingsley's face was everywhere. On magazine covers, news websites, cable broadcasts. Always that same photo. Him in a tailored suit, smiling that confident smile that now looked sinister. The headlines got sharper each day. Kingsley empire built on bodies. Cost of greed. 43 lives for $70,000. Executive audio reveals fatal decision. I watched it unfold from my apartment, barely leaving except for meetings with federal investigators. They needed my testimony, my documentation, my timeline of discovery. I gave them everything. Mateo was interviewed on 3 separate news programs. He spoke calmly, methodically, explaining the financial structures that had hidden Kingsley's cost-cutting measures for decades. "This wasn't one bad decision," he said on camera. "This was systematic. A business model built on cutting corners and hoping no one would check the math." Anika's exposé won immediate recognition. Her editor called it the most important investigative piece the paper had published in 20 years. She wrote about the other buildings, the other violations, the pattern of exploitation that had made the Kingsley fortune possible. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant even. Instead, I felt hollow. Because June wasn't speaking to me. I tried calling her 17 times in the first week. She never answered. I texted. Nothing. I went to her apartment, the one she'd been planning to move out of after the honeymoon, and knocked for 10 minutes before her neighbor told me she wasn't there. "She's staying with friends," the neighbor said, pitying. I left a note under her door. "I'm sorry. Please talk to me. I love you." She never responded. Oliver released a statement through his lawyer 4 days after the wedding. It was brief and devastating. "I had no knowledge of my father's actions. I am cooperating fully with federal investigators. I am deeply sorry to all the families affected by my father's decisions. This is not the man I thought I knew." The statement didn't mention June. I wondered if they were even speaking, if their marriage had survived the reception, or if it had died right there in the conservatory, surrounded by 200 witnesses. Through mutual friends, the few who were still willing to talk to me, I learned that June had moved back in with Rachel, that she'd taken a leave of absence from her job, that she was not doing well. I wanted to go to her. But I also knew that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is give someone space to hate you. So I waited. The federal investigation moved quickly. Edward Kingsley was charged with negligent homicide, fraud, and conspiracy. 3 other Kingsley Properties executives were charged as co-conspirators. Gerald Price, the inspector who'd signed off on the non-existent safety check, was arrested at his home in Scottsdale. The trial date was set for October. In the meantime, Kingsley Properties began to collapse. Investors pulled out. Construction projects were halted. The city revoked several building permits pending review. Banks froze assets. The company that had seemed untouchable just weeks ago was hemorrhaging money and credibility. Margaret Kingsley filed for divorce. Oliver resigned from his teaching position, not because he was implicated, but because he couldn't face his students. He released another statement. "I need time to process what my family's legacy truly means. I'm ashamed to carry the Kingsley name." I read that and felt the weight of it. Another life I'd destroyed. Another good person caught in the blast radius of my truth. Was it worth it? I kept asking myself that question. The families of the fire victims, the ones who'd survived, the ones who'd lost people, they started reaching out. Letters, emails, phone calls. Most were grateful. Some were angry that it had taken so long. A few wanted to know why I'd stayed silent for 17 years. "I was 17, I told one mother who'd lost her daughter. "I didn't know how to fight them." "And now?" she asked. "Now I did." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Thank you. My daughter's name was Lucia. She was 22. She wanted to be a teacher." I wrote down every name they told me. Lucia, Mrs. Chun, David, Amara, Marcus, Rosa. 43 names. 43 people who'd gone to work and never come home. I put the list on my refrigerator. A reminder that this wasn't just about my mother. It was about all of them. But late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about June's face at the reception. The way she'd looked at me like I was a stranger. Like I was the villain. And I'd wonder if I'd made the wrong choice after all. 6 weeks after the wedding, June finally called. It was a Saturday morning. I was making coffee, moving through my kitchen like a ghost when my phone rang. Her name on the screen stopped my heart. I answered on the second ring. "June." Silence. "June? Are you there?" "I'm here." Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying, or screaming, or both. "Thank you for calling. I've been. Don't. Just don't." I stopped. "I need to say something," she continued. "And you need to listen without interrupting. Can you do that?" "Yes." A long pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end. "I hate what you did," she said finally. "I hate that you knew for a year and didn't tell me. I hate that you let me plan a wedding knowing you were going to destroy it. I hate that you made that choice for me." Each word was a knife. But I also read the articles. I listened to the recording. I saw the documents. Her voice cracked. "And I hate that you were right." I closed my eyes. Mom died because of him. Because of them. And 42 other people died too. And if you hadn't done what you did, it would have just disappeared. Again. "June. I'm not done." I bit my lip. "Oliver and I are separated. Not divorced. Not yet. But we're not. We can't be together right now. He's devastated. He's seeing a therapist 3 times a week. He barely eats. And I can't help him because I'm drowning too. I'm so sorry. Stop apologizing." Her voice rose raw. "You're not sorry. If you were sorry, you wouldn't have done it. You made a choice. You chose justice over me. And I need you to own that." "You're right," I said quietly. "I chose justice. I chose Mom. I chose the 43 people who never got a choice. And you chose to destroy my wedding." "Yes." She sobbed. One sharp broken sound. Then silence. "June, if I could go back, would you change it?" The question hung in the air. I thought about the recording, the ledgers, the families who'd called to thank me, the city inspector in handcuffs, Edward Kingsley behind bars. I thought about my mother's hand slipping from mine, about the way she'd sung June to sleep, about the promise I'd made at her funeral, that I wouldn't let her death be meaningless. "No," I whispered. "I wouldn't." June laughed, but it sounded like crying. "At least you're honest. I love you. More than anything." But I couldn't let him walk away. Not again. "I know." She took a shaky breath. "I know you love me. And I know you thought this was the right thing to do. But Mara, you broke my heart. I know. And I don't know if I can forgive you." The words hit like a physical blow. "I understand." "Do you?" she asked. "Because I don't think you do. You've spent 17 years living with this anger, this mission. But I was just trying to be happy. I was just trying to have a life. And you took that from me. You can still have a life. Not the one I wanted," she shouted. "Not the one where I get married and have kids and build something good. That's gone. And you knew it would be, and you did it anyway." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. "I need time," June said finally. I don't know what I need. But I can't see you right now. I can't talk to you. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. This is my fault." "Yeah," she said softly. "It is." The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, listening to silence. Then I sat on the floor and cried for the first time since the reception. The trial began in October. I testified on the 4th day. Walked into that courtroom in a gray suit, swore on a Bible, and told the truth. The prosecutor asked me to explain my investigation. I walked them through it, the archive searches, the contractor records, Mateo's financial documents, the anonymous email with the recording. "And what did you do once you had this evidence?" the prosecutor asked. I coordinated with federal investigators and journalists to release it publicly. Why publicly? Because I didn't trust it would be handled properly behind closed doors. Men like Edward Kingsley have resources. They make things disappear. The defense attorney objected. The judge sustained it. But the words hung in the room anyway. Edward sat at the defense table, 20 pounds thinner than at the wedding, wearing an expensive suit that no longer fit quite right. He stared at me with cold hatred. I stared back. Ms. Bennett, the prosecutor continued, the defense will argue that you orchestrated this exposure out of personal vendetta, that you timed it to cause maximum humiliation to Mr. Kingsley. What do you say to that? I say yes. I did time it deliberately. I wanted him to feel what my mother felt. Trapped helpless watching everything burn. Gasps from the gallery. But I also wanted the truth to be undeniable. If I'd released it quietly, it would have been buried. If I'd released it privately, it would have been negotiated away. I timed it so the world would see exactly who Edward Kingsley is. And who is he? I looked directly at Edward. A man who valued money more than lives. The defense attorney hammered me on cross-examination. Tried to paint me as obsessed, vindictive, someone who'd manipulated evidence to serve a personal grudge. Isn't it true that you signed an NDA 17 years ago accepting a settlement? Yes. And yet you violated that NDA. Yes. Why? Because some agreements aren't worth keeping. You mean when they're inconvenient to your agenda? I mean when they're used to silence the truth about mass death. The judge warned me to answer only the questions asked. I nodded. But when I left the stand, I caught sight of the gallery. Families of the victims filling 3 rows. They were nodding. Some were crying. One woman, the mother who told me about Lucia, mouthed 2 words. Thank you. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording. The financial documents. Expert testimony from engineers about the electrical violations. Testimony from former employees about the pressure to cut costs. Gerald Price testified against Edward in exchange for a reduced sentence. He described how he'd been paid to sign off on inspections he'd never performed, how it had been happening for years across multiple Kingsley properties. They called it efficiency, he said on the stand, but we all knew what it really was. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On November 17th, they returned a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Edward Kingsley was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. No parole eligibility for 15. The courtroom erupted. Families crying, hugging, shouting. The judge had to call for order 3 times. I sat in the back row watching, feeling something I couldn't quite name. Relief? Justice? Emptiness? All of it. None of it. As they led Edward away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one last time. His eyes said, "This isn't over." But it was. In the months that followed, things began to shift. The city launched a comprehensive review of Kingsley Properties' entire portfolio. Every building, every permit, every inspection record. Dozens of violations were found. Other companies were implicated. The scandal rippled outward, forcing reforms in construction oversight and safety regulations. It was too late for my mother. Too late for the 43. But maybe not too late for the next 43. The settlement money from the original fire, the money that had been distributed to families on the condition of silence, was ruled invalid. A judge ordered Kingsley Properties to establish a victim compensation fund using seized assets. Real money. Life-changing money for families who'd been surviving on scraps. Anika won a Pulitzer for her reporting. Matteo started a nonprofit focused on corporate accountability and financial transparency. And I kept working. Fire safety. Building inspections. Trying to make sure that somewhere, someone's mother made it home. June and I didn't speak for 8 months. But on a Saturday in June, exactly 1 year after the wedding that wasn't, she showed up at my apartment. I opened the door and there she was, thinner, older somehow, but still June. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We stood there, neither of us knowing what to say. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked to the window looking out at the city. I stayed by the door, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. "Oliver and I are getting divorced," she said finally. "It's amicable. As much as it can be." He's moving to Portland. Starting over. I'm sorry. Are you? Yes. I know you loved him. I did. She turned to face me. I still do in a way. But loving him meant being connected to all of that. And I couldn't carry it anymore. I nodded. I'm angry at you, she continued. I'm still so angry. You ruined what should have been the best day of my life. I know. But you also. She swallowed hard. You made sure Mom's death mattered. You made sure it wasn't just forgotten. And as much as I hate what it cost, I think she would have been proud of you. My eyes filled. I named her Rowan, June said suddenly. What? My daughter. I named her Rowan. I stared. You're pregnant. 7 months. It's why I called. Why I needed to see you. She put a hand on her belly. I wanted you to know that you're going to be an aunt. And that, despite everything, I want you in her life. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. I can't promise we'll ever be what we were, June said, voice shaking. But I can promise I'll try. Because you're my sister. And because Rowan deserves to know the woman who taught me what it means to fight for what's right. Even when it costs everything. I crossed the room and hugged her, and she let me, and we both cried for what we'd lost, for what we'd found, for the long road still ahead. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. I know, she said. Me too. A year and a half after Edward Kingsley was sentenced, the city broke ground on a new community center. It was built on the site of the old factory, the one that had burned. For years the lot had sat empty, a chain-link fence around crumbling foundations, weeds growing through cracks in the concrete. A scar on the neighborhood that everyone tried not to look at. Now it was something else. The Mara Bennett Center for Building Safety and Community Education. They'd asked me to help design it. Not just the fire safety systems, though I did that too, personally inspecting every wire, every sprinkler head, every exit route, but the whole concept. What it should be. What it should mean. It needs to be more than a memorial, I told the planning committee. It needs to be useful. It needs to help people. So we built something living. The first floor held training classrooms, fire safety certification courses, construction trade programs, electrical and plumbing workshops. Free or low cost, open to anyone in the community. Especially immigrants, especially people who'd been shut out of good jobs by language barriers or lack of credentials. The second floor was a legal aid clinic and workers' rights center. Places where people could report unsafe conditions without fear. Where they could learn their rights. Where they could find help. The third floor was a memorial. 43 names etched in glass, backlit so they glowed. Photos. Stories. A reminder of what had been lost, and why it mattered. My mother's photo was there. She was smiling, wearing her work uniform, standing outside the factory on what must have been a good day. I'd found the picture in an old album. June had it. June came to the photo shoot when the memorial was being designed. She brought Rowan, who was 8 months old then, round-cheeked and curious. Tell her, June said, holding Rowan up to the photo. Tell her who this is. I touched the glass. This is your grandmother. Her name was Rowan, just like yours. She was brave and kind, and she helped people. Rowan grabbed my finger and held on tight. June looked at me with tears in her eyes. Mom would have loved this. Yeah, I said. She would have. The grand opening was in April, on a day that was trying to decide whether it wanted to rain or shine. Gray clouds but warm. Spring fighting with winter. Hundreds of people came. Families of the victims. Community members. City officials who'd helped push the project through. Reporters. Anika was there, of course, covering it for her paper. Mateo gave a speech about accountability and how systems change when people refuse to accept injustice. His nonprofit had helped fund part of the center through a grant program built from seized Kingsley assets. This building exists because one person refused to stay silent, he said, looking at me. Because Mara Bennett decided that the truth mattered more than comfort. We should all be so brave. People applauded. I felt my face get hot. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood at the podium looking out at all those faces. I'd written a speech. Practiced it a dozen times. But when I opened my mouth, different words came out. I'm not good at this, I said. Public speaking. I'm better with blueprints and fire codes and things that have right answers. A few people laughed softly. But I want to tell you something I learned. Justice isn't clean. It's not neat. It doesn't tie up nicely like in movies. I found June in the crowd. She was holding Rowan standing next to Rachel. She nodded at me. When I exposed Edward Kingsley, I destroyed my sister's wedding. I hurt people I loved. I made choices that cost me relationships I'll never get back. I swallowed hard. And I'd do it again. Because the alternative was letting 43 people stay forgotten. Letting the system that killed them keep running. The crowd was silent. This building, this center. It's not just about remembering the people who died. It's about making sure their deaths force change. Real change. The kind that protects the next person and the next and the next. I looked at my mother's photo on the wall behind me. My mom went back into a burning building to help someone. She didn't think about whether it was safe or smart. She just saw someone who needed help. And she went. That's who she was. My voice cracked. I took a breath. I spent 17 years being angry that she died. Angry that the people responsible faced no consequences. Angry that the world just moved on like it didn't matter. I looked back at the crowd. But standing here now I realize she didn't die for nothing. Because her death taught me that some fights are worth having. Even when they cost everything. Especially then. Applause started quiet at first, then building. People stood. I saw faces wet with tears. When it died down I said one more thing. If you take anything from today, let it be this. You don't need permission to demand better. You don't need credentials to fight for what's right. You just need to decide that some truths matter more than comfort. And then you need to be brave enough to speak them. I stepped away from the podium. The crowd erupted. After the ceremony, I walked through the center with June and Rowan. We went through the classrooms, the clinic, the memorial. June stopped in front of Mom's photo for a long time. She looks happy, June said quietly. She was. That day. Do you think she'd forgive you? For what you did to my wedding? I considered that. I think she'd understand why I did it. Whether she'd forgive me, I don't know. Some things are harder to forgive than others. Have you forgiven yourself? I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. She'd changed in the years since the wedding. Harder in some ways, softer in others. Motherhood had added depth to her face, to her voice. No, I said honestly. I don't think I'll ever fully forgive myself for hurting you. Good, June said. And then seeing my expression. I don't mean that cruelly. I mean, don't let yourself off the hook. What you did, it was right. But it also caused real harm. You need to carry both of those truths. I do. Every day. She shifted Rowan to her other hip. For what it's worth, I think I'm starting to understand. Not forgive, maybe. Not completely. But understand. That's more than I deserve. Probably. She smiled just a little. But you're my sister. And Rowan needs to know her aunt. The one who fights dragons. I don't fight dragons. I fight building code violations. Same thing, basically. We laughed. It felt strange and fragile and good. In the months after the center opened, something unexpected happened. People started coming forward. Not just about Kingsley Properties but about other companies, other violations, other cases where safety had been sacrificed for profit. Workers who'd been afraid to speak up suddenly had a place to go. The legal clinic at the center took on case after case. Some were small wage theft, denied overtime. Some were huge, unsafe working conditions, environmental violations, systematic exploitation. The center became a hub, a place where information flowed, where patterns emerged, where people realized they weren't alone. Anika started calling it the Bennett effect. She wrote an article about how one act of transparency had created ripples, had given other people permission to demand accountability. You didn't just expose Edward Kingsley, she told me over coffee one afternoon. You changed the calculation. You showed people that silence has a cost too. That sometimes speaking up is worth the risk. I didn't do it alone, I said. You, Matteo, the investigators. But you started it. You took the first step. That matters. I thought about that. About how one decision, one terrible, costly, necessary decision, had created something larger than I'd ever imagined. Maybe that was the point. Maybe justice wasn't one big moment. It was a million small choices, each one building on the last until the foundation shifted. Oliver reached out to me about a year after the center opened. It was an email, short and careful. Ma, I hope this message finds you well. I've been following the news about the Mara Bennett Center. It's remarkable work. Your mother would be proud. I've been in Portland teaching again, trying to figure out who I am outside of my family's legacy. It's been hard, but I think I'm finally getting there. I don't blame you for what you did. I need you to know that. What you exposed, it needed to be exposed. My father destroyed lives. He destroyed families. And he would have kept doing it if you hadn't stopped him. June and I have stayed in touch. We're not together, but we're friends. Or trying to be. She's an incredible mother. Rowan is lucky to have her. And to have you. I'm writing because I want you to know something. I'm working with a nonprofit here that advocates for ethical building practices. Using my architecture background for something good, finally. In a strange way, what you did, the exposure, the trial, all of it, it freed me. I don't have to carry his legacy anymore. I can build my own. Thank you for that. Oliver. I read the email 3 times. Then I wrote back. Oliver. Thank you for reaching out. I think about you often. About the cost of that day. You and June deserve better than what you got. I'm glad you're finding your way. Your father's choices aren't yours to carry. You're a good person. I knew that the first time I met you. I'm proud of the work you're doing. Keep building good things. Mara. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was something. Acknowledgement. Mutual respect born from shared wreckage. Some relationships don't survive the truth. But some do. They just come out different on the other side. 2 years after the center opened, I got a letter from a woman named Sophia Martinez. She'd worked at the factory. She'd been on shift the morning of the fire but had called in sick with the flu. Her co-workers, 3 of them, had died. Dear Ms. Bennett, I've wanted to write this letter for a long time but didn't know how. I was supposed to be at work the day of the fire. If I hadn't been sick, I would have died with them. Maria, Chun, David, they were my friends. We had lunch together every day. We talked about our kids, our dreams, stupid things that made us laugh. For 17 years I've carried guilt. Survivor's guilt, my therapist calls it. Why them and not me? What made my life more valuable? I watched the trial. I read every article. I came to the opening of the center. And I finally understand. Their lives weren't less valuable. Their deaths just mattered less to the people in power. Until you made them matter. You gave them names again. You gave them justice. You proved that their lives were worth fighting for. I work at the center now, in the training program, teaching sewing classes. Safe ones, in a building with proper fire suppression and emergency exits, and someone who actually checks that everything works. Every day I walk past the memorial. Every day I see their faces. And every day I think, this is what love looks like. Fighting for people even when they're gone. Refusing to let them be forgotten. Thank you for loving them enough to fight. Sophia. I kept that letter in my wallet. On hard days, and there were plenty, I'd take it out and read it. Remind myself why it mattered. June and I had dinner every Sunday now. A tradition we'd started slowly, carefully, rebuilding trust one meal at a time. Rowan was 3 years old, wild-haired and fearless. She called me Auntie Mara and asked a million questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly? Why do you check all the smoke detectors every time you visit? That last one made June laugh. Because your aunt doesn't trust anything she hasn't personally inspected. That's not entirely true, I said. Name one thing you trust without verification. I looked at June, at Rowan coloring at the table, at the life my sister had built from the ashes of that terrible day. You, I said. I trust you. June's eyes got bright. She reached across the table and took my hand. You can't rebuild without first taking out what's rotten, I'd said at the center's opening. That was true for buildings. But it was true for relationships too. For systems. For ourselves. Sometimes love means tearing down what's broken. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because on the other side of destruction, if you're brave enough to keep building, there's a chance for something better. Something true. 5 years after Edward Kingsley was sentenced, I stood in the memorial room of the Mara Bennett Center on the anniversary of the fire. It had become an annual gathering. Families of the victims, community members, people who'd been helped by the center's programs. A moment of silence. A reading of names. A reminder that memory is an active choice, not a passive state. This year June spoke. She'd volunteered, said she wanted to do it. She stood at the podium, Rowan beside her, and read all 43 names slowly with intention. After each name, someone in the crowd said, "Remembered." Rowan Bennett. Remembered. Chun Wei. Remembered. David Morales. Remembered. When she finished, she said, "These people mattered. Their lives mattered. Their deaths mattered. And because one person refused to let their deaths be convenient, the world changed. Not completely. Not perfectly. But it changed." She looked at me. "My sister once told me that justice doesn't need spectacle to be righteous. Just has to be true." I didn't understand what she meant then. I was too angry at what truth had cost me. Her voice steadied. "But I understand now. Truth is expensive. Costs relationships, comfort, sometimes everything we hold dear. But lies cost more. They cost dignity. They cost safety. They cost lives." She picked up Rowan, who wrapped her arms around June's neck. "My daughter bears the name of a woman who died trying to help someone. And she's growing up in a world that's a little bit safer, a little bit more just, because her aunt refused to let that death be meaningless." June looked directly at me, tears streaming. "I'm proud to be your sister, Mara. I'm proud of what you did. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." The room was silent except for the sound of quiet crying. I walked to the podium. June handed me the microphone. I looked at all those faces, survivors, families, strangers who'd been touched by this story. "My mother used to sing a song about a sparrow learning to fly in the rain," I said. She'd sing it to June when she was scared. It was about being small but brave. About facing storms even when you don't think you can. I touched the photograph of my mother on the wall. I used to think I failed her. That I should have stopped the fire somehow, should have saved her, should have been there. My voice broke. But I realize now, she taught me how to fly in the rain. How to be small and brave and stubborn enough to face storms. And when I finally understood what had killed her, when I finally had the proof and the power to do something about it, I had a choice. Stay comfortable or honor what she taught me. I looked at June. I chose to honor her. And it cost me my sister's wedding, her marriage, years of our relationship. It cost me sleep and peace and the easier version of my life. I smiled through tears. But it also gave 43 people their names back. It changed laws. It protected future workers. It built this center. And slowly, carefully, it gave me back my sister. I stepped away from the microphone and walked to June. We hugged, right there in front of everyone, holding each other the way we had when she was 7 and I was 17 and the world had just fallen apart. "We survived," she whispered. "We did," I said. "We really did." Moral of the story. You know what I learned through all of this? Justice isn't a moment. It's not that scene in the movies where the bad guy gets arrested and everyone claps and the credits roll. Justice is showing up every day to build something better from what was broken. It's training the next generation of workers to know their rights. It's creating systems that protect people instead of profit. It's teaching your niece that her grandmother was brave, and that bravery matters. Some people ask if I regret it. If I'd do it differently if I could go back. The truth? I regret hurting June. I regret that Oliver lost his family. I regret every painful consequence that fell on good people who didn't deserve it. But I don't regret fighting for justice. I don't regret giving 43 people their dignity back. I don't regret proving that some lives, even poor lives, immigrant lives, working class lives, matter enough to topple an empire. Would I do it again? Yes. Every time. Because my mother taught me something in the way she lived and the way she died. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the cost is everything you have. Even when the cost is everything. If my story touched you, hit that subscribe button for more emotional tales from Queen's Voice. And even if it didn't, come on, subscribe anyway, I'll win you over next time. Drop a comment, like the video, and let's keep the stories alive. Thanks for listening. And remember, you don't need permission to fight for what's right. You just need to be brave enough to start.